Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. In this video, we're going to be looking at the latest and greatest British law that is now the latest craze among pretty much all of UK-based businesses because they have no choice but to follow this law. Otherwise, they get fined millions and millions of pounds. But nonetheless, the Online Safety Act is now being put into effect. What is the Online Safety Act, I hear you ask? Very good question. Have you ever been on a website? Perhaps any of you who are millennials or Gen Zs might know. And the website said, in order to access this content, you need to click on this little tick box to confirm that you are at least the required age, whether that's 18, 16, or 13, or 15, whatever it might be, to access this content. And of course, you realize very quickly that if you click the little box and that's it, you don't do anything else, as far as that website is concerned, you have validated that that is indeed at least your age. And you can watch this content and no more questions will be asked. Well, the Online Safety Act is basically when, as a nation, you come together with the understanding that parents just aren't parenting properly. The government needs to sneak in and start parenting for you. Instead of ensuring that what your children who live in the same home as you and are frequently around you, they're that little weird object in the corner of your peripheral while you're watching television, instead of checking periodically throughout the day to ensure they aren't watching hardcore pornographic content at the age of 12, you no longer have to do this because the government will handle it for you. But exactly how do they do this? Well, before, instead of your 10-year-old having to click a box confirming they are at least the age of 18, they now need to send in some form of identification so that your child can be verified and the government can refuse access to bigroundandbouncy.com. Let's take a look at our most trustworthy source, the BBC, and see what they have to say. As porn sites apply new age checks, will users hand over personal ID? The days of porn users ticking a box to say they are 18 are meant to be over. From Friday, websites operating in the UK with pornographic content must robustly age check users. So I can tell you now that this will not work. It won't work. It won't work for a ton of reasons, but the most basic one is the fact that your children are always going to be more tech savvy than you are. Second of all, if your children are accessing pornographic content, the primary reason that has happened is because you have not parented that child correctly. That child has done a few things in the background you haven't noticed. So, for example, the child has realized that you're not paying attention. The child has also realized that you have no real desire to pay attention. They've also realized that there's a good likelihood you're not going to start paying attention anytime soon, and hence they can start viewing pornography behind your back and using all of the latest tech-savvy ways of doing it. The issue with children was never the fact that it was a tech issue. Children have always been pretty great at tech problems. Most of what they learn in school is probably tech focused these days, so having to adapt to some age verification check isn't going to stop children at all. In fact, it probably just makes it a more fun challenge to try to get around it. What always stops children though is parents. If you don't have people parenting correctly or at all in the most minimal of senses, you will get this issue. And yes, I'm being very tongue-in-cheek here because I think it's absolutely bizarre that we still live under this pretense that it's just something that happens because it's there and nothing can be done about it. The children are just drawn to it like a magnet, and what are you going to do? It's impossible. If only some really difficult technical problem would come along and stop the children from viewing the pornography. Or maybe you could just watch your kids. Maybe that's another option. And I know people would say, oh, but you can't watch them all the time. They're gonna access it elsewhere anyway. Okay, you can't always monitor what your child's doing all of the time. And I'm not saying that. I'm not saying you need to be the pornography police. I'm not saying you need to helicopter parent your child 24/7 all the time. I'm just saying you should not make it so comfortably accessible that it's something that they can have access to commonly and think it's a perfectly normal and okay thing. If you've given your children devices that they own, that you consider to be theirs and no one else's, that they have access to whenever they want to, including when they're alone, and these devices have access to the internet, congratulations! You've just become probably a part of the problem. The internet isn't a safe place for children. It just isn't, because the internet is a representation of the average normal person, and the average normal person, well, okay, yeah, the average normal person's pretty low. Pretty not great. The average person's probably an adult, and they probably have all sorts of problems. Exposing your children to that, it's not a good idea. What you could do instead is invest some time in ensuring that when you're with them, they don't have access to this material because you simply would never let them use it alone. Or if they do use it alone, it's in such an abnormal context that it becomes not practical to frequently watch pornography. I don't know why I have to say this, but here I am. Adults wanting to access explicit material should experience a significant change in how they use the internet, while websites that ignore the new laws could be fined up to 18 million or 10% of worldwide revenue. Ofcom, which estimates about 40 million people watch online pornography in the UK, so that's around a quarter, or that's approximately a quarter of people in the UK are watching online pornography. Says tougher age checks will make it harder for children to stumble across harmful material online. Okay, you can't wrap children in cotton wool and have them never encounter anything. Realistically, through either themselves being on the internet, even with your permission, even with you guarding them, even with you looking after them and parenting them, they're going to encounter things that are probably not age related at some point, and it's your job as a parent to intervene and ensure that does not happen on a frequent basis. Likewise, you can't follow them when they go out of the house and they're with friends. You can't monitor that. But these are infrequent events that are not all of the time every day. The problem isn't children stumbling across adult material at some point. The issue is the fact that people are allowing children to make it a normal part of their everyday life because they are left alone with adult content with no supervision all of the time, or near all of the time. That's the issue that no one actually tries to do anything about. And the Online Safety Act is not going to do anything about that at all, because it still seems to think the issue is with the technology, not with the responsibility of the parents to every once in a while look at what's on the screen of your child's tablet that you bought back in 2018. So it goes on to say what are the rules, how is this going to work. Ofcom, the media regulator, has set out a number of ways websites can verify the age of users, including through credit card checks, photo ID matching, and estimating age using a selfie. It says thousands of sites have committed to age checks. Whatever format platforms choose, they must be technically accurate, robust, reliable, and fair. Some sites that host sexually explicit content have already committed to introducing age checks. But Ofcom says they must also take action over methods people might use to get around checks. So because businesses will be fined 18 million or 10% of global revenue if they fail to meet this law, even though it's something that at the moment, as far as I can tell, it's a UK specific law, the likelihood of this extending to the EU is very high. But because every website basically has some kind of interaction with the UK is an island with 70 million people on it, it's pretty big to just ignore. You can't really ignore the UK, we're too amazing for that. The way that websites can navigate this is they either make a special age verifier that only applies in certain regions, like the UK at the moment, but doesn't apply it anywhere else where that law's not in effect. That's costly, time consuming, doesn't seem particularly a great option. Or they can pull out of the UK, so that website isn't accessible from the UK, and just isolate around 70 million of a potential user base. That doesn't sound great either, so they don't really want to do that. Or they can just implement age verification laws for everyone, regardless of whether or not it's a legal requirement in the place you live. Hello, America. So realistically, most websites are just going to do it everywhere, which means we're looking at a point now where we may actually have large-scale ID-based verification for pretty much all of the internet as we know it. Whether it's Netflix, Google, YouTube, Amazon, Facebook, Instagram, what are some other things that cool kids use? Twitter, dating sites, pretty much everywhere will be liable to implement this in some effect because it's just more practical to do it. It's more practical to implement for the whole world rather than to do it for specific areas or to isolate specific areas and just not have people from the UK go on your website anymore. I just want to mention as well, it mentioned that you can do age verification based off selfies. Please do not do this. I'm telling you now, it's one of the most easily fabricated things to do ever. We now have things like ChatGPT using OpenAI that can generate images of people. It's not particularly difficult, and even if you force it to be done through, say for example, a camera phone, you can very easily just take a picture of something you've printed off. I don't understand why anyone would think selfie-based age verification is a good idea. Anyone under 18 will solve that in a matter of moments. That's not going to stop them for 2 seconds. That's not even a challenge to anyone technically minded. But let's think about this from the average user's perspective. What this would mean is if you want to use certain services as an adult, you would have to give your picture, your selfie, potentially if this selfie method is introduced, or your passport, or driving license, which contain pictures of you, or your credit card, which doesn't. Maybe that's a slightly better approach. But ultimately it goes to a third-party regulatory body that is meant to keep all this very private information about you. And just to be clear, this will include almost certainly things like your name, your email address, the username you used to sign up for the service with, the image of you. If it includes passport or driving license, then that's a ton more information about you. All this information could be stored on the regulatory body's database that they have and they own, which they now own your data, which companies like Google, Amazon, Netflix, whoever it might be, then has a partnership with that body, and they then ask that body, hey, we just got some new verification data from one of our users. Can you please confirm that this is an actual person and send the information back to us confirming they are the age that they said they were, and we'll allow them on the platform or we'll deny them if they're not. But I don't have any confidence that the government or hackers won't be able to, or Anonymous or some group like that, won't be able to hack into these and get all of that data and either sell it on or use it for malicious purposes. For example, imagine this lovely scenario. Imagine if you happen to have some views that are not in line with the current government, aka you're an average British citizen. Well, you might think it's fine to go on X, Twitter, whatever we call it, and make a post explaining your views. Perhaps you think that biological men cannot become biological women or vice versa. Perhaps you think certain acronyms are not good. Perhaps you think that Keir Starmer is not the best person to be leading the government, or any more possible opinions you may have that are not particularly politically correct or government friendly. Well, someone in theory could do a check on you by appealing to this regulatory body that has the database of your details. If it does store it, they can then base it off your username, which could have been stored as part of your verification process along with a picture of you. And if it's passport or driving license, then in theory it will be possible as well to get things like address information from you. And they can then do what they want with that information. For example, if they feel like sending a police car to your home because of something you've said on social media, they could conceivably do that and potentially even know where to send the police to within a matter of moments because they have a regulatory body they are in communication with that you gave all that information to. And they don't even need to figure out who is there at the address because they have a picture of you, they can see what you look like, they know who they're looking for. That to me doesn't sound like a great idea, kind of sounds a bit dystopian. I think George Orwell probably would have a few things to say about that. What about VPNs? When BBC News wrote about the 7 methods of age verification adult websites may use in the UK and the companies who may be employed to do it, one reader comment resonated with many others. Sure, I will give out my sensitive information to some random unproven company, or I will use a VPN, they said. Difficult choice. A virtual private network, VPN, is a legal way to securely connect one device to another using the internet. They have a variety of uses, but one is getting around anything blocked because of your location. According to Ofcom, platforms must not host, share, or permit content encouraging use of VPNs to get around age checks. And for a lot of people, that might be the first thing they think about. Hey, I could just use a VPN, pretend I'm actually in France or Germany or actually probably not the EU, America. I'll pretend I'm in America so I don't have to sign up with age verification and give away my private details. I can just pretend to be somewhere else where that's not required and it will be fine. But remember what I said before, realistically, if things like this work, the whole world will do it. It won't be a case of this website does it, but this website doesn't, or this website does it a little differently from everything else. Once the standard has been met and the threat of force of losing £18 million in revenue, or potentially even more than that, when people realize that that's a real threat, they will cave in droves and it will just become the same standard approach that every other website's doing. And what's the easiest, most convenient answer? That everyone in the world has to do this, because why on earth would you isolate markets like the UK and not others when if you have to follow these laws, you'd probably just do it for everyone. That way you're compliant with the law and you haven't isolated any group, in a way kind of isolated everyone, but you're just going to bank that most people will cave in and give away their private details, which, let's be honest, a lot of people probably will. But in all seriousness, a big problem we've always had, and particularly my generation, was the fact that there was so little awareness of what online websites looked like. The internet was such a big unknown to my parents, to the average millennial's parents had no idea what the internet was or how on earth to use it. So there just wasn't a practical way that they could parent a child's internet usage because they just didn't know what they were looking for. They didn't know how it even worked. And at the time, they didn't even know the internet would become a big thing. So why worry about it? Now we live in a different world. We live in a world where we know the internet is a huge thing. You're watching this video on the internet, so I hope I don't need to convince you of that. And your children will be doing it as well. I have 2 children. I have my son and my daughter. And knowing what I know, growing up as a millennial, I know how easy it is to take advantage of parents that just don't understand these things, and how easy it is from a technical point of view to get around restrictions or difficulties. I had a friend who he told me how his dad was wise enough to put a restriction on Google image search. And again, this shows, yeah, we're going back to the early 2000s. Wise enough to put a restriction on Google image search. But unfortunately, my friend had figured out that you can actually just use a different variant of the Google image search from a different nation. So he ended up using Google image search in Russia, or the Russian version of Google image search, or something like that. And because that wasn't on the list of blocked domains or something like that, he was able to continue using Google image search for things he shouldn't have been looking at. Ultimately, the only real answer to this always has been just responsibility. We live in a culture that is incredibly individualistic. We think that we, through the liberties that we have now, don't have any responsibilities, but actually we do. In fact, the responsibilities we have are totally new. We have to understand things like the internet, how the internet works, how we're able to ensure that our children don't have access to things they just shouldn't have access to. But instead of being taught this, we don't have the communities in place anymore to share this kind of knowledge. So we don't react to it. Everyone's just alone. You don't know your neighbors. You don't know how this stuff works. So you just ignore it because there's nothing else to do or you can do. This is why it's important to have a community. It's why it's important not just to live in an isolated way alone. You're not an island. You have people who depend on you. You have people you need to support. No matter who you are or what it looks like, you are wanted and needed in some way. One last thing. If you happen to be in the crowd of people that actually have the nerve to suggest that pornography doesn't damage or in any way harm an underage child's mental state or development, I think you have no idea what you're talking about. You have absolutely no idea. You couldn't be more wrong if you tried. I would actually go further than this and say we currently live in a generation where I think most men don't even have a correct view of sexuality. They have a warped view of sexuality because of what they were sold as children, which is a profoundly evil thing that I think many people should be held accountable for. But let's be good parents. Let's make sure our children aren't left alone with internet access enabled devices that they can get whenever they want when you're not watching. Let's not do that. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this is just a quick video to talk through the Internet Safety Act and how amazing and great, and how the British people are pioneers in the tech world yet again. We were the people that gave all your private details away. Again, not me. It was Keir Starmer. Actually, it wasn't really him. It was Conservatives, I think. Was it Conservatives? It was either the Labour government or it was a Conservative government that did this. Either way, it's the same thing. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, have a great day. God bless you, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.